Okay, we're going to get started here. Come on in, get your coffee, get your snacks, and come in. I know we have some people that have trickled in, so I wanted to let you guys know if you wanted to have your book bound, you can have it bound. There are envelopes by the door. You just put it, let me see that envelope, Sue. You put your name on your workbook and then put your papers in here at the end of the day. And Sue, that's Sue's envelope. Sandy will have them bound for you. And they're really nice because they have this protection, on the front and back. And they're easy to get into. So come on in, find a place to sit. We have some amazing speakers, which honestly, if you just have one of these guys, you are blessed. To have both of them today is just a super blessing. So I don't know, have you guys done that? Like spoken together recently? Never? Oh my gosh, this is the premiere of them speaking together, so that's fun. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We are ordering lunch, and so if you paid online for lunch, we are getting your order. If you haven't paid yet, pay me, or get on the Church Center app and just pay general funding on the Church Center app and let me know so that we make sure that we have enough for everybody. And we will be eating down in the kids center area. And so there's tables set up down there. And so after this next session, we'll head down there and eat. How's everybody doing? Good. Does anybody have a takeaway or something that really impacted them from the first session that they want to share? I see everybody snacking, chewing, and we're chewing. Speaking of chewing, I like the part of like the focus and chewing, meditating on what God is speaking to you and just focusing on Him and what He wants for your life. A couple of years ago, I had started looking into what meditation meant. And it's actually throughout the Psalms that David encourages us to meditate on the word. And so keeping him at the forefront, something that you're just mentally chewing on. I love that concept of mental chewing. I think it gives you like a visual of something that's kind of intangible. So I love that. Anything that we have questions about at this point or need to communicate? I think the live stream is going. Marco, is that correct? So you can let people know the live stream is up. The agenda. We do have the agenda on a slide, and we're going to get that printed out. So the agenda, we're headed into the second session now. We will have lunch at 12. The third session starts at 1:30, and then we'll have a 2:30 break, and the fourth session, 2:45, will start just a workshop on putting all the pieces together and bringing some organization with a personal life plan. So have you guys had a chance to look through your workbooks and see all of the different things? There's some really good tools in there, so make sure you're able to look through. We won't have time to go through all of it, and so you're going to have to do that on your own. We'll do a little bit of it during the workshop. So, okay, I think we are good. Next, we have Josh and Jenna Jones. Josh and Jenna are amazing friends and kingdom builders in Billings, Montana. They both own their own separate businesses. Josh is in construction and Jenna does web design. And they have such a fantastic story from God just radically transforming their lives in ministry, starting in ministry, and then going into a kingdom business And so I'm just excited to hear everything that you guys have to say. I have 2 chairs here, so if you guys want to sit, you're welcome to. Do you want me to move this for you? Yeah, I probably won't need that. Okay, so please welcome Josh and Jenna Jones.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, you guys. Thanks for having us today. I'm Jenna. Okay, I'm a little bit more planned. So basically, I planned the slides, and then Josh is going to chime in with jokes, stories, advice. So that's our plan today. I thought I'd just tell you guys a story really quick. Okay, this drum cage back here. Josh, I remember one time we were helping with a church plant, and we had to build a drum cage, and it was looking a little janky. Did you?
Well, so I'm in construction, so to me it's like super important that all the angles are perfect, and it had to be this 8-sided cage. It's super weird. The shape was really strange, but it was really important to me that it looked immaculate. And we were building it with my dad, who also did construction, but he's a little more laissez-faire.
Pentecostal pastor.
Yeah. So we're building it, and I'm like, gosh, that angle doesn't look right to me. And he's like, oh, you just put some velvet on it. You just, he grew up in Assemblies of God. You just put velvet on anything that doesn't look right.
Put velvet on it?
Velvet. I was like, I've never seen velvet in years. Anyway. Yeah.
So that's kind of a joke for us. If ever, there's something you're like, just put some velvet on it. So here's how this circles back today. I found this velvet shirt at TJ Maxx. I was like, I don't know, maybe we should just put some velvet on it. So,
not sure whether I should be offended by that or not. It doesn't look quite right. Let's put some velvet on that. That's great.
So, yeah. So, anyhow, last night he actually dreamed about that he was going to try to wear pink shorts and a tank top for this. And he dreamed that I vetoed it. And I was like, your dream prepared you. It's going to be the velvet shirt. So, okay. Anyhow, I'm super excited to speak to you guys today. This is fun. I do business workshops, so I don't speak a lot, but I do a lot of workshops. So I'd love to do this like a workshop. Rosebud asked us to share about just what it looks like for if you have a dream that you're hoping to bring to reality. And so we've gotten a chance to help launch lots of different ministries. We've gotten to launch different businesses. I've even gotten to do some citywide government type projects. And then in my marketing job, really, we get to do lots of branding and websites for people that are launching things. So almost every single week, I'm sitting with somebody that has a really cool idea or, a God seed, a vision in their heart, and I get to be the person that sits with them and help make an action plan to make it real. So we've gotten to do that a lot in our real lives, and I've gotten to sit with lots of people that are doing it. So we've got 6 different lessons that we've learned. These are all lessons that we've learned together. So we'll kind of talk about some things and then tell some stories, and we'd love to answer questions, tell anything we've learned. A lot of things that we've done have worked, and a lot of things haven't worked. And so I think it's all valuable, whether it worked or didn't. So I'd love to tell you guys that stuff too. Before we start, I'd love to know, are you guys, who is already thinking of starting something? Is anyone considering starting a ministry thing or a business thing? Or do you guys have stuff? Yeah, yeah. I know. Does anybody want to chime in, give us some stuff that you're thinking or dreaming about so we can, yeah?
I'm going to do a bakery. I'm going to dream to help the youth that get out of foster care. Okay, my kids were in foster care. Well, when they aged out of foster care and came home, they didn't know how to vacuum. They didn't know everyday life necessities. Okay, when you grow in a group home, they don't make you do that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So kids need to learn this type of stuff as they get older to become self-sufficient adults.
Yeah.
And I think having a program would be great for that.
Yeah. Cool.
I've always wanted to do.
I love it. Okay. Did I hear bakery over here?
Yeah, my son wants to do a bakery.
That's awesome. Okay. Anybody else have a thing that I always think that God gives us things in seed form, the things that you get to carry are just a seed and you have to bring it to life. Okay, well, do you want to put up I don't know who's doing slides. Okay, we can go to the next one. Okay, that's our family. I just thought we've got 4 cute kids. I was just going to show you, here's some of the stuff that we've gotten to do so you guys can ask questions about it later and then we can give you some stories. But like I said, I do marketing. Josh does roofing. We have some Airbnbs and rentals, so we have some good real estate experience. The Billings Night of Worship was way back, that first one at the depot. I don't know if any of you guys were there. Oh, I love that. Yeah. So the depot in West High, and then it grew in to the one on the rims when Abe and Jennifer and other people jumped in. We got to help plant Word of Life Church. If anybody's been to the Copper Ridge Park, I got to be Leslie Nope for a little while and help get a park put in. And then co-working space was one that we considered starting but chose not to. So we'll talk about that later. So anyhow, some of our experience. Okay. So here's our very first thing when you're considering, like, should I launch something? And I said, build a foundation. I was trying to think about what it feels like every single time we've decided to take on a new thing. And really what it feels like is adding weight. Like the picture that I was thinking of, have you guys ever done squats with a barbell? You like get the barbell on your back. You've got your normal carrying capacity. And to me, every single time we've launched something like a business or a ministry, it's like adding plates onto that barbell. And so really, I think when you choose to launch a business or a ministry, you are choosing to carry more weight than just yourself. You're choosing to take on weight that's going to benefit other people. And so I would just say, consider that. I said, you need to become a person that can carry more weight. And what I've seen a lot of is if you don't consider this ahead of time, you don't realize you're going to be carrying more weight, and then you pay for it. And so what I said the hidden costs are your health, your marriage, your kids, anxiety, depression, or addiction. So I've seen a lot of people that have launched things, that have experienced success, but maybe didn't factor in the additional weight that they were going to be carrying, and then they ended up paying for it later. So I think that's why I put this right at the very beginning, because because it's not worth it. Do you want to tell your?
Yeah. Well, I do roofing, and if you've been in Montana very long, you know that we have a hailstorm every handful of years. And the first couple of hailstorms that we had, the first one where I was the primary general contractor, it's kind of wild because it's almost like a gold rush. It's a huge opportunity, and it's a rare situation where the exact amount of work that you're willing to do is that's how much profit you can make. So there's really almost no limit. And so it's really tricky because that happens not just for me, but that happens for all these other roofing companies all across the state of Montana and in Billings. And what we saw happen over and over, and thankfully my wife was very quick to set some boundaries, is because there's no limit to how much you can make. If you're willing to just work 24 hours a day, you're going to make money 24 hours a day. If you're willing to push through every weekend, you make money through every weekend. And early on, it was really tempting for me. It was really hard for me to shut off my phone in the evening and on the weekends. And it was hard for me to get home at 6 o'clock at night or 5 o'clock at night, and hard for me not to work on Saturday. And gosh, somebody called me on Sunday and there's this opportunity. And what I realized fairly early on, I should say she realized more than anything, was that if we had no boundaries, if there was no foundation, and if there was no set of disciplines and life structure, we could make our entire life the pursuit of something that is maybe feels meaningful and that it's an opportunity to make a lot of money. And yet in the process, it might be at the cost of our health, how we take care of our body. It might be at the cost of our families. It might be at the cost of our ability to even maintain integrity. And in this business now for quite a few years, I've seen so many people that have this huge opportunity. They make a ton of money. They go so hard. They make so much money. And in the process, they lose their family. They maybe develop an addiction. They get divorced. And their health, goes to shambles. So I think that's really important to set the foundation that says, okay, these are the non-negotiables. This is how I will live my life. I will live with these disciplines. I will live with these habits. These are the boundaries I'm going to set. Even if it's hugely successful, even if it means I could make more money, I'm going to choose to live inside of these parameters.
Yeah, and I would say, I think whatever you do, especially if you are the leader, nobody's setting boundaries for you or parameters for you. And if you start to experience any level of success, or even like trying to start something, even a ministry, very quickly there's unlimited demands on your time. If you will give it, people will ask something of you all the time. So it's up to you to define what you're willing and able to give. And I think even for me with website stuff, as soon as things started to be successful, it was even hard for it to not to consume my mind 24/7, to just, even if I was with my kids, I'm thinking of all this stuff. And I think for me, it truly even came down to lordship, of just choosing, like, this isn't going to be an idol. Like, I'm going to pursue this, I'm going to walk forward, but it always has to be laid down. And I think the lordship part is even knowing, like, on a Saturday or a Sunday, even if you're not making money you could, or even if you're missing an opportunity or whatever, that it's not worth compromising. And the weight picture, I think of it this way: like, if you did load up a barbell with beyond your capacity and you tried to squat that, maybe you could do it, but you might get a back injury, or you might, like, is your core able to support the extra weight? So that's the first one. These are the specific things that I said that I really think you need parameters around. One, I think the time is a big deal. So I said, get clear on your priorities and block your time. So really immediately, if you launch something, they'll ask for all your time, and you need to decide, what are my clear priorities and how am I going to align my time to match what matters? So I think that's probably literally the first thing. And then next, I said, do the invisible work, the daily habits and disciplines. This is really what builds the foundation that can support you when things are stressful or hard. And so even the things like, okay, I have to sleep 8 hours every night to be healthy. I have to have like a morning check-in with God and an evening check-in with God. I have to have time with my spouse. Just all of those little invisible daily habits really support you. And then I said, you need parameters to protect your relationship and your rest. So those are two things I think, at least for me, the rest is the literal hardest one, because things come up and that's the easiest one for me to be like, I just won't sleep. But that will, it won't work. It doesn't, you do actually need to sleep. So you need to protect your relationships and rest. And then this is another one I said, you need to be able to effectively manage time, money, stress, and conflict. So if you are running anything, I feel like anybody that's run anything, your stress level will go up. You're going to be managing larger amounts of money. So I would say if you can't manage your own money, then for sure it's going to be harder when those dollar amounts are a lot higher. And then also conflict. I just feel like, I'm just thinking of anyone that runs anything, that the more you do, the more you're just the person that deals with the difficult stuff. And so I think you just have to have a comfort level of just knowing there's hard things that come up, and you just have to be willing to lean in and have those conversations, like literally every single day. So, so those would be my first things, like establish those daily habits and disciplines, make sure that you're clear on your time priorities and your time boundaries, and develop the skills to manage money and stress and conflict. So that's our first one. Yeah. Okay, solve a real problem. Hold on, okay, we do have time up there. I want to make sure I don't talk too long here. Okay, so this kind of comes from my marketing background. So if you're launching something and you come see me for marketing, and I'm helping you kind of write your brand script, like, what is your messaging? The questions I'm going to ask you is, who are the people? Like, who is it that you're serving? What's the problem? What are their pain points? How are you solving it? And what's the outcome? If you didn't build it around those things, you're going to have a really hard time being successful at anything. And so I've got that cheeseburger up here because this was a perfect example that came up recently. We have good friends that had an amazing restaurant, and it recently had to close. They weren't making it. They have literally one of the top chefs in the area who has won national awards, incredible chef. But they weren't making enough money, so they had to close. And I was asking them, I was like, why did you have to close? And they're like, because we live in Montana and people want to buy cheeseburgers and steak. They're like, we should have just put a cheeseburger on our menu. And so I think that's a classic mistake where the chef, for example, he is a brilliant and talented chef, and he wants to make all of this fancy food. But we live in Montana, and people want to buy cheeseburgers and steak. And so I think sometimes the mistake that you make is you're only thinking about yourself. You're like, what are my giftings? What has God called me to? What am I going to go out there and do? But truly, any successful business or ministry is actually solving problems and serving people. So you can't really start with like, how awesome can I be and how can I get people on board with that? You have to start with, who are the people? How am I solving problems, and how am I serving? If you start with that, if you start with the real people, real problems, real demand that you're solving, it will work. Did you have?
Yeah, it's true. I think that removes the need to even market yourself or to build something yourself. I think that early on in construction, I found that the scariest thing for people to deal with is insurance. And not that I had a ton of experience with it, but I basically kind of took myself to insurance school to learn how to handle insurance because I knew that that was the problem that people had. So if I had said, I know you just had this huge thing, you have no idea where to go, the insurance company didn't give you a lot of information, the thing that they need is help with the insurance. They need somebody to come in and carry their problem, to take their problem, to solve it for them, simplify it, and then just produce a good product. And so doing that simple thing took away any need for marketing in my business, in that I knew that if I did this well, that they would be like, wow, that was amazing. And they'll know so many other people that are having that same issue and that are having that same fear and that are having the same struggles with insurance. So
Yeah. And again, marketing is the primary thing I do. And if you are really clear on who are the people, what's the problem, how are we solving it, I feel like that's everything. That's all of it.
Yeah, I will say a couple in 2018. Sorry, most of my experiences in construction as of late. But in 2018, there was a hailstorm in Roundup, Montana. And at that same time, we were pregnant with our fourth child. And my wife did not want me to go to Roundup every day and be gone, which was kind of like one of those marriage boundaries things, the foundational element. And so the idea that we had, there was just this tiny little storm that just hit a real small section of Billings. And so many realtors weren't sure if they had hail damage or not. And so the idea we came up with is I called realtors and said, I'm willing to look at any roof, anytime, no cost. I'll show up the same day you call me. I will make sure you have a quick turnaround. And the thing that's really important to me is I'll be honest. So if it needs work, then I'll do it. If not, I'll write you a little letter that says it doesn't need it. And that little bit of information, that little bit of time changed the whole flow of what my business is, which is now probably 80% of what I do is for realtors. So, yeah.
I was just going to think of a ministry example too, because business owners, it is super cool because it really is just people that are solving problems. And so I love that. I love that that's majority of businesses are just solving a problem. But ministry, okay, you guys, in like 2015, we were trying to do the Billings House of Prayer. If you guys remember, some of you guys were there. Yeah, we were trying to do the Billings House of Prayer. And I remember thinking like, okay, if we could just get people in the room for worship, that would be like, that's all we need. And I remember we did get people in the room for worship and prayer, but there was no like culture of worship and prayer. It was like people didn't know what to do. And so I feel like we were like, it was like kind of working, but kind of not working. And then I remember after 6 months, we just got our core group together. It was like 12 people. And we said, okay, let's just be really honest. I feel like so many times in Billings, we've seen there's kind of this like uprising and then it kind of squanders. And there's like a chance and then it doesn't. Like, we're like, what is that? Like, what is the problem here that we're dealing with? And people were so honest. I remember one girl specifically, she had just gotten back from YWAM. She had been in Herrnhut, Germany, that's where they had 100 years of continuous prayer. And she said, for me, if I'm really honest, she goes, I really I know that there's more. I've seen God do more. I don't know that I believe that God would do that in Billings. She said so that was an honest problem. And then another thing that someone said was, I know God has called me here, but I feel like I'm the literal only one. I feel like I'm the only one here that's carrying the candle. That was like an honest problem. And then another thing that somebody said was, I think people here in Billings do genuinely love the Lord. They just don't know. They just haven't experienced like worship. And so out of those problems, we were like, okay, let's start with that. Let's start with where our city is at, where these people are at. Let's start with these problems. And so that was how we started the Billings Night of Worship, was we were like, okay, we need to get everybody in one room so you can look around and you can see I'm not the only one. And
yeah, we were realizing maybe like hours of prayer is a little bit much for people to start. However, in most cases, if people gather together and they unify and worship, God shows up. And it's beautiful and it's attractive, and God meets people where they're at. So we're like, I think if we started with worship, we might be able to sneak the prayer in.
We're not going to say it out loud. No. But truly the night of worship started out of getting honest about the problems. It started with, how can we awaken people so that they're hungry for worship? How can we get people in the room so they can see I'm not the only one? How can we build faith that God could do things in Billings? And so I would say whether it's a business or a ministry, start with who are the people that we're serving? What are the real problems? How are we creating a solution? Okay, next slide. Okay, get in position. We're starting with a basketball analogy here. Josh, do you want to?
Yeah, okay, so my son plays basketball. He's really short, as I was at his age, and he's playing in junior high now. And it's a huge frustration for me because he's actually a really great shooter. And over, he'll catch the ball. But when he catches the ball, he's not immediately ready to shoot. And because he's short, if he's not immediately ready to shoot, what happens is he's not able to shoot. Somebody raises their hands and he ends up passing the ball. And I worked with him after one of his sessions because growing up, I played basketball, and over, coaches told me the same thing. I was always short. I was always small. So they said, when the ball is on its way, before the ball ever gets there, you need to be in position to shoot immediately. You need to already have done all the work ahead of time. So you need to plant your right foot, you need to turn square to the hoop, catch the ball in right shooting position so that immediately as you're open and you catch the ball, you have the opportunity to shoot the ball. So, yeah.
Yeah, so get in position. So this is what I would say is if you are hoping to do something or to launch something, you're almost never going to have all the pieces. So part of it is depending on you're waiting for an opportunity. You're waiting for an opportunity that is outside of you. Like, I don't know, maybe you're waiting for the right time or for an amount of money or for someone to recognize you or a partnership or whatever it is. But the thing is, if you have not already done all of the groundwork, that opportunity will come and you will not be able to step into it. You won't be prepared. You won't be ready to go for it. And so I would say you need to act like an opportunity is coming. So you need to assume there will be an opportunity. How am I moving towards and getting into position so that when that ball comes to me, I can immediately shoot? This might sound redundant, but the opportunity, when you get the opportunity, it's too late to prepare. And so by the time an opportunity comes, you don't have the chance to say what can I do to get this together? How can I become the person that's ready to step into this? You don't have that chance anymore. So you need to have done all of the preparation with the expectation that eventually there will be an opportunity and you already have every single thing in a row. And so this is one habit that I do that you guys could do is, like I said, I get to meet with all the time people that have ideas and are trying to launch things. And so whenever I have an idea, I open my notes app in my phone and I just try to immediately put together all the pieces. Just act like, okay, let's say I am going to launch this tomorrow, next week, this week. What exactly would it look like? What pieces do I have? And I try to get as far down the line as I possibly can until I hit the spot where I'm like, and that's my limit. When you get your limit, that is the opportunity you're looking for. So you don't even know what opportunity you need until you have pushed the plan as far as you possibly can by yourself. So I'll give you an example I'll give you a worship example and a business example. Okay, so back to that night of worship thing. We'd had that meeting. We got honest. We're like, we know the problem. So we started praying. We're like, okay, we would love to do a citywide night of worship. So we're praying. I remember we walked down by the depot. We found out that the depot was like the founding stone of our city. That was how Billings got started, was at the depot. So we have like 50 people coming to stuff. We don't really even have a ministry or anything. I mean, we have like nothing really working. But I remember I was like, okay, I'd love to do a citywide night of worship. If we ever got to do it, we should do it at the depot. And I tried to put together as many pieces as we could. And then the opportunity that came was somebody had mentioned our name to Sean Foyt, and he called us and he was like, hey, I'm going to be coming through Billings. Would you want to do a worship night? So that is the point where it's like, that was the one opportunity. And we already knew, like, here's the 3 problems we're solving. Here's the location. Here's the team. All of those pieces were already ready. So when we got that one opportunity, everything was ready to move forward. I'll tell you another one now that I'm currently collecting pieces for, but I don't think will get played out for a long time. This was like, I don't know, we had this idea maybe 5 years ago. We were like, it'd be super fun to buy a big piece of property in Red Lodge and to do like a tiny house retreat place or something, like, you know, where it'd be like a lodge and a bunch of tiny houses and you could do stuff. So for that one, like, am I going to be able to do that now? No. Am I collecting pieces? For sure. Like, probably we aren't going to be able to do this for another 10 years. But I'll tell you what I've done. I already have a bunch of house plans. We met with a real estate agent in Red Lodge. We toured a bunch of properties, found an amazing property. I met with 2 different developers to understand what it looks like to develop land, what that process would look like, learning all of those things. There's like, you have to get your plan approved by city officials, all of this stuff. So I have pushed that plan as far as I possibly can. The only 2 things we need is $2 million and a big chunk of time to do it. And so in my mind, we're like, that's going to be our 50s. That's what we're going to do in our 50s. Our kids will be out of the house. Maybe we'll have $2,000 and we will have a big chunk of time. But you don't even, like, if you just have an idea and there's probably like 20 pieces that are needed, even if I got $2 million, I wouldn't know what to do with it. Do you know what I mean? Even if I got a big chunk of time, it wouldn't connect in my brain. That's the one last piece I need to make this happen. And so I think sometimes you look at an idea and you're like, oh, I shouldn't even pursue it because that's too much money or it's too much time or whatever. It might not be. Like, there's a whole lot of things where initially we would have thought that's not possible because of XYZ, but you'd be surprised. I would say put together every single piece that you can. And like, if it's a puzzle and it's 100 pieces, you might figure out, hey, I actually have 89 pieces. I only need 11. And if you only need 11, then your brain is out there looking for those 11 pieces. You're like, there's a lot of it going. I just need these couple of things. And you would be surprised how often God can bring those pieces and fulfill it. But you need to do the original work of putting together all of the pieces you possibly can with the expectation that it's possible that God could bring the last pieces to fulfill it.
Yeah, I remember it was a big dream of mine to have rental properties. And at the time, we had just barely eked into our very first house. And so we owned one property at home, and that was like a bit of a stretch. And yet I felt like we were going to have rental properties. And so I called multiple realtors, and I had them put me on a list. And if you've probably, some of you have probably done this, in realtor.com, you can have a realtor say, you can tell them, hey, any house that's in this price range that meets these parameters. So I was looking for an up-down duplex or a multifamily home that was inside these price parameters, and I want to see every single thing that hits the market. And so while we had no money, for an entire year, I saw every single property that hit the market, and I would open it up every night and I would study it. And I'd be like, okay. And what happened in that process, we still didn't have the money for a good chunk of that time. However, in that process, I learned the Billings real estate market And so when a good opportunity popped up, there were actually multiple opportunities that were good opportunities that we just didn't have the money yet. But I was like, that's what a good opportunity looks like. And then, 6 months and a year down the road, there was a hailstorm and there was a financial opportunity. And because of that, I knew exactly what a good property looked like. And so each property that we bought that were our first properties were home runs, because there had been a year's worth of investing into, this is what a good deal looks like. This is what success would look like. And this is our opportunity. And all I need is just the money to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I would say too, I remember, we have 4 kids. So there was a season when I was, at home a lot, just with them. And I remember really wanting to do more things, like really wanting to start an agency. And I knew that it wasn't my time. But I remember specifically thinking, it's not my time yet, but it will be. And I want to do all of the work right now to become the person that's able to step into that. And so I think you have to start even with a belief that that it is possible to step into that. And even I try to look at people that are ahead of me that are maybe doing things that I want to do. And you have to be willing to think of yourself like that and look at what are the gaps? How are they operating, living, functioning? How are they showing up on a daily basis to be in that position? And how can I close that gap before I have an opportunity?
Honestly, as we're sitting here, and when we said how many are looking to start a business or a ministry or something like that, and a couple of you raised your hands, but I'm fairly certain that there's more of you, but the business or the dream or the vision feels like such a pipe dream that you're afraid to say it out loud, that you feel like that's way beyond. However, I believe that as we're saying this, you're realizing that so many of the things that God has brought to fruition in our life were pipe dreams at the time, and now they seem small to us, but at the time they seemed impossible. And so I just want to encourage you that I think there's probably something in your heart that you're like, man, that would be amazing. I don't see how it's even remotely possible. I don't have the money for that. I don't have the time for that. I don't have the skills for that. However, I believe that if God's put that inside your heart, that we need to start doing the work and preparing as though he's going to provide the opportunity at some point in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to don't start with, is it even possible? Because you don't know. You don't know yet. I would say start with, how many pieces can I put together so I can understand what opportunity I'm looking for? That's what I would start with. Okay, next slide. Got a picture of Abe in there.
That guy's professionally handsome right there.
Oh, it's funny. Okay, make connections. So people are always required. It never happens in a silo. So I think this is super important. I remember a really valuable lesson I learned. I interned at the Billings Chamber of Commerce when I was in college. I really love big picture planning, even city planning. And so they had talked about that one of the initiatives that they wanted to help spearhead was to get bike trails in Billings, all of our Billings. And I am perfect, let's make a plan. They're like, nope, you do not start with plans, you start with people. They said the very first thing that we're gonna do is think of every single person in our city that's interested in making this happen, and we're gonna get them in a room. That's always where you start. And so that was so surprising for me, but I feel like I've learned that lesson over and over and over again, that if you're interested in moving something forward, start with the people and get them in a room before you make any plans. Let me think of a couple of things like this. I would say, one, we almost launched this co-working space. And so again, this would go back to who are the people, what's the problem, what's the solution? And then I also had this experience from the chamber, get the people in the room. So I tried to think through, okay, who are all of the people in Billings that would be interested in paying for a shared office space? So I got all of those people in the room, and you just want to get feedback, first of all, hey, would you do this? What would be your top priorities? Is it price, or is it a conference room, or is it kombucha on tap, or is it cool office parties? So if you just got to get the people in the room and understand what do people want and what's happening here. Same thing with the Copper Ridge Playground. So with that, do you guys know where Copper Ridge is? Have you guys been out there? Okay, it's like this. It's this development that's out kind of towards Ironwood, but they built this development with a big green space, and there was supposed to be a playground there, and they never put it in. So are you guys on your like community Facebook pages? I don't know. You see all the chat. So I feel like once a week the neighborhood was like, how do we get a park? How are we going to get a park? There's supposed to be a park. What do we do for a park? This would get brought up all the time. And I think there's maybe like 600 houses in the neighborhood, and constantly it was. So at least for me, I thought like I could probably help make this happen. Like if there's a lot of people that want to do this, we probably could. Number one thing is let's just get everybody in the room that's interested in making this happen, and let's just talk about it. So yeah, I would say for me, that's always the starting point, is to understand you probably don't have all the pieces yourself. You might have a piece, but there are other people that are going to have pieces that you don't. And it's the people thing is maybe the most important thing. Yeah, okay, let me see what I was going to. Okay, here's on a couple, who's aligned locally, meet them. Oh, okay, here's one thing I was going to say. People will not collaborate until they know you and like you and trust you. And so I feel like we've learned this the hard way. Like sometimes when I didn't start with people, you just start with like making up a cool plan in your closet, and then you just hard launch it and nobody cares. So if that happens to you, I would say like get out there and talk to people and find out if what you're saying even resonates. But no matter what you do, you're going to have people buy into it. So I remember having a good friend, somebody that we knew growing up with, and he really wanted to write this book about the Bride of Christ. He finally did it, but he had included nobody. So he like soft launches his book. Nobody reads it ever. So even something as like small as I'd love to write a book, like if you're going to write a book, people have to read it. If you're going to launch a ministry, people have to come. If you're going to have a business, you have to have clients. And so there's no way that you can accomplish anything without getting people to buy in. Does that make sense? So I wouldn't skip that part. I wouldn't just like start in the closet alone and then just launch a cool vision, because nobody will care. I don't know. We've seen that happen. Know you, like you, trust you. I think, honestly, for me, I think that's what I've learned is the more things that we want to move forward in Billings, it requires connections and relationship, and it requires trust. Like people have to know you and trust you, especially in Montana. I feel like Montana, that trust factor is such a big deal. So I would just consider that anytime you have the chance to meet somebody, for any reason, that's like literally your biggest opportunity. Every time you meet someone, just think it's important to build this connection, to understand what are their gifts and their strengths, and to build trust with this person, because likely you're going to need to collaborate with them for something. Okay, we learned this one, add value before you make an ask. I think we learned this a lot with ministry stuff when we were wanting to do like a collaborative thing. Everybody's trying to do their own cool thing, and it doesn't actually feel good to get a lot of asks from people. And so truly, you have to build real connections. You need to see people. You need to be willing to understand, like, what are you trying to move forward? And you need to be able to truly support that before you ask something. So I feel like that was what God put in our heart when we were trying to do citywide stuff, was we need to meet people and we need to serve before we ask for anything. Did you want to?
Yeah, I think for a really long time, actually, Life Source was one of the churches, but there were a number of churches where I would volunteer to come for a while, help them build their sound system, help train their worship team. Sometimes I'd play on their worship team. There are a bunch of churches where I volunteered to be their backup guy, like the fill-in guy when their worship leader goes out of town. I would be the person that they would call. And it's not even like that was necessarily very convenient. However, I knew that it added value and that it was helpful. And in that process, it built a lot of unity at churches where we didn't necessarily have a ton of connections, but the unity that was built in us serving created the opportunity for us to do something more citywide down the road.
Yeah, and it's funny because I feel like so much of ministry stuff is just like serve people, but if you're in the habit of serving people, that's like the best possible foundation to wanting to like launch a business or something else later, because truly seeing other people and serving helps build the trust and credibility. And the other thing I would say too about why it's important to see other people, I have a lot of nonprofit clients, and sometimes you're like kind of, I don't want to say competing in the same place, but kind of doing a similar type of thing. And like, I can say sometimes what's happened is there might have been somebody that's been in the trenches for 20 years that's just like serving, doing all this stuff. And you might pop your head up and you're like, hey, I have an idea. Let's all do this. And they're like, yeah, we've been doing that for 20 years. It'd be awesome if you wanted to like jump on board and help us. And then maybe we can help with your idea. So I think just honoring that there are other people that are moving other things forward. And I think to have the humility to see people, to honor the work that's already being done, to serve what people, the vision they have before you kind of pop your head up with, here's what I'd like to do. Okay, the last part I would say mentors, especially because we live in Billings. Anytime we've had an idea, it's really helpful for me to see like who else is doing this. And a lot of times it's in other places. So even when we were doing Airbnb, we'd travel, go to try and stay other places, get an idea. Just try to see people who are ahead of you that are doing what you're doing. And the more that you can watch and learn from them directly, I think even for me with doing a marketing agency, there's not tons of women in Billings that are doing what I'm doing. And so I think I was hitting a lid where I was like, gosh, I don't even like know what this looks like. I don't know how I'm supposed to show up or lead this. And so for the last 3 years, I've paid for coaching and mentorship of people that do what I'm doing at a larger scale in other cities, because just seeing someone doing what you want to do helps connect a lot of the dots in your brain. I also said peers. If you're wanting to step up into more of a leadership position, the more that you can have friends that are operating at that same level, the better, because again, it is a higher cost. You are dealing with stress and conflict and time management and all kinds of stuff like that. So I think when you have peers that are pushing forward at the same place, it helps you to take your place. And then I also said, employees or clients or whoever, you just have to realize for anything to work, people have to catch your vision. So you have to make sure that what you're saying is going to resonate with the real people.
Yeah, on the peers thing, when I first started doing construction, it felt a little bit to me like, gosh, I don't know if I am capable of running a business and being successful at it. And I was in this small group with a bunch of other guys that own businesses, and it was so incredibly helpful because they were like, oh yeah, you definitely could do that. And seeing them do it, I was like, gosh, I don't think they're that much smarter than me. It made me feel like, okay, yeah, I probably could do that. But they saw the value, and then they'd already been through so many of the things that I was about to face, and none of it seemed overwhelming. And so I think putting yourself in the room with people that are doing what you want to do is a big add.
I heard somebody say this. Sometimes comparing down is helpful. Have you ever seen somebody, like, for example, that like has kids, and you're like, maybe if you were scared to become a parent, you're like, I don't know. You're like, they're doing it. You're like, if all these people can do it, we can probably figure it out. So it's good to compare up, but also it's good if you can see some normal people. Actually, when we read that book, God's Generals, did you guys ever read that? It's like all the revivalists. They all like had mental issues and divorces. I was like, we're fine. I was like, we can do this. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, do the math. This is actually a really important one. So this is the point where, let's say you've done all this stuff. You've gotten in position. You've done all the prep work. You have an action plan. You got the opportunity. And now you're deciding, do I pull the trigger? And this is an interesting one because we have multiple times gotten to this point and then decided not to move forward with something. And so I think this is where, what did he say? Create an action plan. Now honestly evaluate. How much will this cost? First of all, it's always more money than you think it is, literally always. How long will this take? Always more. It's always going to take more time than you think. And then this question, will it be profitable? Now, I would say this, something doesn't have to be profitable for it to be worth it, but you need to be clear on why you're doing something before you start. And so it's not a business if it's not profitable. And maybe you're like, this is a hobby. Sure, that's fine. But a job that's a hobby. It's a job that you actually make no money. So I think for me, there's been multiple times when I've wanted to pursue a jobby where I'm like, let's launch this thing. And we look at the numbers and it's going to make literally zero money. And Josh is like, do you have capacity for a jobby? And I'm like, no, I don't. So I'll give you 2 examples of things that we got all the way through the whole process and then didn't pursue. One, this Copper Ridge Park thing. So you guys, we go through the whole thing. We get the group together. The community supports it. So we like look at the plans. We're like, okay, to get this park done, it was going to cost $189,000. That's how much it was going to cost. And then we figured out, okay, how can we fund it? We could do private fundraising, or we could vote and get a TIF district where our community is going to be taxed. First of all, people were furious about the possibility of being taxed $30 for a playground. Anyhow, so we did not go with that option. We decided to fundraise. The whole thing was going to be possible. We had this team of 4 women. We have to raise $189,000. We're going to work with the city to get this park put in. So it takes us about 6 months to get to this spot where we're like, we have an action plan. It's possible. We're going to get the park. This is how much money it's going to take. And then we realized it was going to take 2 years of about 5 hours a week. It's going to be about 5 hours a week, 2 years to get this playground put in. And Josh, I think us sitting with it was like, do you want to spend 5 hours a week for 2 years to get a playground put in? And it was like, no, I don't.
We probably won't even be here, which was true.
We just moved to a neighborhood with a park.
By the time it was built.
But we got that whole plan put in, but there was 3 other moms who were like, I will spend 2 years to get this park put in. And so they were very kind. And I was part of the 6-month planning launch phase. And then I stepped back and they did spend the 2 years and they did get the park put in. But there's a really nice park in Copper Ridge neighborhood, and I helped kind of put that plan together. But I think that was an important thing to like honestly sit with, like, okay, it usually is years. If you're doing a big thing, it's usually years. It's like, how much time am I willing to invest to make this happen? And again, that wasn't profitable, and that's fine, but you need to be clear up front. The other one was the co-working space. So it was actually, have you guys seen that CLDI building downtown? So there's some of our clients and they love them. They're in the middle of this like remodel and they have no plan for this whole basement floor. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it would be so cool to do a co-working space where it could be offices for all of these people that have small businesses and nonprofits. So we get the people in the room. We understand like, okay, most people are like, okay, I'd be willing to pay about $150 a month for a private desk. We went to Denver and visited multiple co-working spaces. I hired a co-working launch coach out of New York to just understand like, okay, what does this look like? What is it going to take? And what he basically told me is, if you already have your own office and you want to add this to it, it's a fun side gig, but you're going to make maybe $500 a month, probably more like $250 or $300. And Josh was like, really? He's like, is this what you...
First of all, I had already told her there was no money in this. So, but it took somebody else explaining that for it to make sense.
But truly, we had all the plans together, but it wasn't going to be profitable, and that's okay. But again, then you have to calculate. Okay, what am I willing to invest in this, knowing that this is a jobby? And so, anyhow, we didn't do that one either. We put the brakes on, but it was actually we had already created all the plans. So Eric Basie was like, we'll do it. So he just took my plans. They did make their basement a co-working space and they ran it because it was their place. So, and then actually it was really cool because I had collaborated with the city of Billings too. And they also took my plans and then they launched Rock 31. They have the co-working space downtown. They gave me a shout out at their annual meeting, which is really nice. So there was a lot. So those are 2 things where it was like, we got up to the point and then you really are weighing, how much is this going to cost? How much time is this going to take? Do I honestly have that capacity, or am I going to be choosing this at the expense of my kids or my marriage or my health?
On the opposite side of that, on the positive side, where we did the math and decided to do it, there were a number of years where we'd bought a handful of up-down duplexes. And to me, at the time, that was the system that worked in Billings, and that was a profitable type A rental property. And so it was working, so I felt like I don't know if we need to change anything. But when we travel, we'd stay at these Airbnbs, and Jenna would be like, we should do an Airbnb. And I was like, I don't think anybody's even going to come to Billings. I don't know how that would work. And so we kept going back and forth about it. And then finally I was like, I should do the math. So I looked at, if we're going to do an Airbnb, it has to be a brand new property. And so I did the math. I found these properties that were pretty well priced, and they're brand new, and they're perfect for Airbnb. And then I went through all of the numbers, and I realized, okay.
We did the research. We found out that like a national, you can expect 40% occupancy. So we were like, okay, if the average occupancy is 40%, how would this all pencil?
Okay, so based on 40%, I was like, okay, we would at least do a little bit better than break even. If it was at 50%, it would make the same as our current properties. They're up-down duplexes. And anything over 50% would be dramatically more than what we're making in these up-down duplexes. So it made a lot of sense. I was like, well, worst case scenario, we'll be fine. The likely scenario, it'll make the same. And the best case scenario, it has a huge upside.
Okay, wait, I'll back up. You know my little like tiny house Red Lodge thing? I was like, let's do like 10 tiny, Josh is like, let's try this in Billings first. Let's try one. So this was actually our like trial for the bigger thing that we haven't done yet.
That being said, it ended up, we ended up launching it, and it's about 85 to 90% occupancy. And we realized we need to get rid of all these long-term rentals and just do this, because this makes a lot more sense. But had we not done the math, I don't think we'd have ever pulled the trigger, because at the time there weren't really very many Airbnbs in Billings. Of course, now there's quite a few, but at the time there were just very few. And from what we could see, we were like, gosh, I can't tell if it's working or not. So.
Yeah, and I think I put up there too, make sure that you calculate best case, probable, and worst case. And you don't fully know how things are going to turn out. So I think you need to honestly sit with what would all of those things look like. If this is my best case scenario, what does that look like? What's just a middle of the road? And you need to consider the worst case. How am I going to deal with that? And I really love, I don't think that it's realistic to only pursue something if you think it's going to be successful, because you don't really know. There's no way that your first time out of the gate that you're going to get everything right. You just won't. There's no way. So I think I loved this question that I heard on a podcast. They said, what is a reasonable loss if this doesn't work out? And so I think that's worth thinking through. Like, hey, I'd really like to pursue this. I'd like to move forward. I'm willing to forego some cost, even if this doesn't work out. Like, even if I lose some money or invest some time, it's worth it to try moving this forward. And so I think you consider what you are willing to lose to try this out, and be prepared for that as you move forward. And so I do think that there's a reasonable amount of loss. I feel like we've had a lot of reasonable loss.
Yeah. Well, and I would say, let's just pull something around. Say you wanted to start a bakery. And you're like, gosh, I don't have the money to do this huge project, but I could probably do a food truck, and I'm going to try this project. Or I could sell baked goods at the Saturday morning downtown festival thing, the farmer's market. And then I could say, okay, based on this, I worked this much time. This is how much money it made. This is how much money it would it would cost if it was brick and mortar. This is how much money it would be if it was a food truck. And then I do the math and say, okay, reasonably, worst case scenario, I do a little better than break even. Likely scenario, I make okay money. Best case scenario, this goes gangbusters. And then I think that's probably something you could pull the trigger on.
Mm-hmm. I remember I took an entrepreneurship class in college, and we all had to like pick a business and then go through all these steps and then calculate the numbers. And over 50% of the people in the class said, after looking at the plans and the numbers, I would not launch this business. So I just think it's super important to do the numbers and consider the cost before you push something forward. The last thing I said is pass, wait, or move forward. So like I said, there's been multiple things that I've gotten really far and then ultimately decided I don't actually want to do this. Wait, there's been a lot of things like this where I have an idea and I'm like, I think I have all the pieces, but it's just not the right season yet. And so sometimes that's the answer. Sometimes when you get honest, you're like, I just don't have the time right now, but I think there's a different season that I could. That's still a win, I think. And then, or there's things like with us with Airbnb when you're like, wow, I had no idea. These numbers are better than I thought. So Okay, last slide. You guys are doing good. There. Okay. Adapt and grow. So I would say it's not success or failure. It's moving forward over time. Like anybody that has had successful things have had lots of things that didn't work out leading up to that. And I don't think that you can consider just because something didn't work out that it was a failure. And so I said, steward your losses because life is long. I think that's one thing that we've learned is I turned 40 this year. I think being young, I feel like we were hustling really hard to get a lot of stuff done. And then sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And honestly, we did a lot of things and we were like, okay, we still have a lot of, like, what are we going to do for these last half? So here's one thing I would say with all of those things that I pursued that did not work out, it still helped position me as first for the next related opportunity. And so I would consider, this is what I said. No, like, let's say that whatever your idea is doesn't work out, okay? Like, let's say whatever you pursue, whatever, like you missed a variable. Honestly, like sometimes you miss one variable, like you plan an event and you're like, didn't realize 8 p.m. was too late. Like that was the one reason it didn't work, but maybe you got everything else right. Or I didn't realize I got the price wrong, or I didn't realize whatever. So a lot of it is learning, but I said you can always build new relationships. You can always learn. And you always build trust when you act with integrity. And so those are like the essential building blocks to launch anything successful. And so if no matter what you go into, you realize the connection with these people is hugely important. Like never burn a bridge because your idea isn't working out. You need to understand like maybe this idea won't work out, but I'm going to be collaborating with these people for 40 more years. Like don't burn that bridge. And like the learning part, like, again, maybe you got a lot of pieces right, but you were missing this one thing. There's a good chance that in a couple of years, you can circle back with a little bit different team and a little different scenario. So just really calculate, like, what am I learning? What pieces have I built? And then I think the trust thing, like I've learned this a lot with my website stuff, that I'll get a fair amount of people that come to me who are not a right match for my business. But it's hugely important for me to build trust every single time. So even when somebody comes to me and I think, okay, you don't have the money or you're not in the right position or I don't serve it, I still always think, how can I connect with this person, build trust, add value, knowing that that is going to matter for the long term, even if this one little situation doesn't work out. And so I've had many, many opportunities where I had something in mind, it didn't work out, but then it got remixed and circled back for another one. I'll tell you one thing that happened like this. When I was first starting with websites, I was thinking it'd be so fun to do like a weekend boot camp where I'll teach you how to build your whole website in a weekend. So if you're, I think, did you come to this? Did you? Okay. I don't know. So I wrote this entire workshop. It was like an all-day thing where it was like, come and we'll build your whole website in a day. So I was like piloting this. I got 20 people to come. I think like Jeremy Stansover. There was a bunch of people that came. So I run the whole workshop. The first hour is an intro. It goes great. The first technical thing we do, the whole class is like, nope. And so we get to the end and I do like a evaluation, like what did you learn the most? And the primary feedback I got was the thing that I learned the most is that I don't want to build my own website. I was like, okay. So, and so I'm like, okay, I'm going to simplify this. Maybe it will be over a couple days. Maybe I'll like pre-do as many pieces as I possibly can. So I rework the whole thing. I invite 20 new people. It's much shorter, much more simplified, much more pre-done. It is the exact same feedback. Everybody is like, I for sure don't want to do this. That's what I feel positive about. So that got super clear for me, like this is not going to happen. But here's what was cool that came out of it. The first intro was basically like why your website matters and the role it's supposed to play in your marketing plan. And this was, the Small Business Development Center let me host it there, and they heard me give the intro. And so their feedback to me was like, listen, we know this workshop isn't going to work. your intro was great. They're like, what if you, and they proposed to me, they're like, what if we had you travel all over Montana to the small business cities and you gave just your intro as a marketing talk? And I was like, perfect. So that happened. So I got to go all over Montana and do marketing workshops, and it was literally just the intro to my workshop, but that was the amount that people are interested in, is that part of it. But that was an example where, like, my initial idea, I didn't get all the pieces right. It wasn't going to work, but I learned a lot. I built really valuable connections, and I built trust, and it pivoted me into an opportunity that was going to work. So honestly, a lot of things that have worked came out of that. We launched something that didn't work, but we learned a lot, built connections, and then it kind of regrew in a different direction that we didn't see it going. Oh yeah, do you want to talk about the compound interest part?
And we probably got to be done because we're getting towards the end here. But I think a number of different friends that are younger than us, we joined this gym, and there's all these people that are younger than us that were asking for advice on how do you start a business, how are you successful financially, how do you get to where you, not that we're anywhere great, but how do you get further down the road? And I feel like in the process of being asked that question over and over and over, the greatest realization that I had and the best piece of advice that I had is that life is not addition and subtraction. It's compound interest. That the choices and the decisions that you make in the small things, in the day-to-day, the disciplines that you put in place, the way that you handle your money, the way that you treat people, the relationships that you build, it's not addition and subtraction. Over time, it's compound interest. And you get down the road and you're like, I don't even know how I got here because I didn't even see that coming. And yet it was the day-to-day delayed reward, making good choices, living with integrity, doing the right thing, and just choosing to do the small things in an excellent way. Over time, the compound interest is way beyond what your expectations are. A lot of people don't, a lot of times, I didn't even understand when I was younger, when you put your money in the stock market, you're like, well, I don't know how that ends up being enough money for retirement if you're just putting a few $100s a month into this account. I don't understand it. And yet over time, that turns into compound interest, and the interest is on the interest. And so I just think that those small decisions, those little choices that we make, the disciplines, the way that we build our foundation, the things that we put effort into, and the way that we live our lives with integrity builds compound interest over time. So.
Yeah, and I would say I really feel like it's doing the invisible work that, like, everybody, I get to be with these people every week that are launching things and are successful. And I can tell you that every single person is just doing the invisible hard work every single day. Yeah. And you don't even, like, showing up with integrity, serving people, making the right choices, like working hard. And I think we've experienced that a lot, that even as we've gotten older, all of those seeds that you've planted start to bear fruit. And so if you have been planting seeds for 20 years, then you're going to start to reap that. And if you've been serving people, adding value, collaborating, that all comes back. And if you haven't, that all comes back too. I can tell you one, like, really cool opportunity that happened. This would have been like 15 years ago. I was just starting my business. There were these guys that were like my age at the time. So we were like 20s. They were doing all the direct mail for some, like, it was during a political campaign. So it was like all the Republicans, they were doing all the direct mail. So for a couple month period, I did every single mailer that you got in your mailbox for a couple months. And then that cycle was over and they moved on and I moved on. But I just worked with them for a couple months. But I feel like building a good relationship, building trust, working hard, showing up with integrity. And so fast forward 15 years, they own a huge print company, and then I own my website company. They had a website department, and then they decided, they're like, we don't actually want to do web anymore. So in their mind, they're filtering through, who do we know and who do we trust? I haven't talked to them in 15 years, but they thought of me, and they're like, hey, we remember working with you. We see you run this web company now. Would you like all of our website clients? It's 150 clients. I was like, yeah, would love that. But I feel like that was an example of, like, it was it was 15 years ago. It was a small thing, but as you get older, all of those things add up. And so, I don't know. I think you just have to commit to doing the invisible work and just know that every single thing counts. Yeah. Okay, those are all of our slides. We've got. I think we have like maybe 5 minutes if you guys want to talk about any specific things. If you don't, that's okay. Do you want to tell them any jokes, Josh? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're seeking these projects that you're thinking of doing, how did you go about researching for funding sources or, grants or?
I know, all the different things. What did we do? Oh gosh, I don't know. I feel like
Honestly, what I expect is, in most cases, I think the final piece is the financial element of it.
yeah.
And so we went as far as we could in every way, and we tried to turn over every rock financially that we could. And I don't know that there ever is just free money that shows up or an opportunity like that. However, I generally believe that if God puts a dream or a vision inside your heart, it's for a reason, one way or another, and it might not look exactly like you think it should. And the truth is, I think if you can hold on to dreams loosely enough to say, this is a dream that I have, it probably won't look exactly like I expect it to look, but I'm going to do as much as I can to cause this dream to come to fruition, and trust that God, somewhere in the process, will provide for the dream or the vision that he's put in my heart. I've talked to Abe before, and the dreams that he has for this city and this church and dream centers and all those different things. I mean, it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And yet God put that inside of his heart, and he's doing as much as he knows to do on the day-to-day basis and putting the pieces together. And I think one day there will be an opportunity.
Okay, this is such a good question. I do agree that the money is probably usually the last piece, but I would say you can't move forward assuming that that's not possible. I do remember we had a lot of like money, like mental wrestling early on, and I remember something that really shifted it for me. I remember somebody was saying, okay, if you could do anything for God and you knew it would be successful, anything, like what would you do? And then if you ask, why are you not doing that? The number one thing people say, Christians in the church, is because of money. And so I think you have to get past the barrier of assuming that God can't provide the finances. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think you have to start with, like...
And I think it's entirely possible that God hasn't, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but that God has not given the provision yet, possibly because we haven't done all the other work to push it along. A lot of people want a perfect opportunity to arise, and then they'll do the work to do it. But if you're doing the work after the opportunity's already arisen, it's too late. If I would have said, gosh, I just need to have this money, and then I'll start looking at the housing market. Well, if you know the housing market, houses only last on the market for a month or two. So if I don't already have all the work done ahead of time, when the money did show up, I wouldn't have been in position to buy. So.
Yeah, and I would say it's interesting because we did ministry stuff for 10 years, and then when Josh first started to do roofing, it was the first time that money became a thing that we were dealing with, and I was just surprised all of the complicated emotions I felt about it, because I think we just assumed that we would always be in ministry, we'd always be poor, and that we would never have resources to accomplish anything. And so I think that you have to shift to like taking that power away from money, just assuming like we're going to move forward. It's going to cost money. It's okay for me to have money, assuming that God's going to resource things that he wants you to accomplish. I don't know. I think you have to not look at the numbers and let that talk you down from, and I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that there isn't free money out there, but if you have done every single piece and money is the last one, you're much more likely for that piece to come into place. So I would. If
you went into a bank and you said, I want X amount of dollars to start this business, the number one question they'd ask you is, where's your business plan? What's your model? So if you've already done all of the work, it's likely that there's an opportunity with an investor that could be completely possible, or a bank that could be completely possible. I just don't think that any of that happens without doing the work ahead of time.
Yeah, okay, you guys, there's this like silly game on my phone. I don't know if you guys have played this, but you like match up numbers, and when you like connect all of the 2s, they disappear and turn into 4s. And then when you connect all the 4s, they disappear and turn into 8s. So you play the game stays exactly the same, but the further along you get, the bigger the numbers get. So I feel like that's even why I put that manager finances part at the beginning, because you almost have to teach yourself to be blind to how big the numbers get, and you just are stewarding resources consistently and effectively, and trust that even when God adds more zeros, that you're going to operate exactly the same, that you're going to be wise, responsible steward.
Yeah, one of our friends runs a financial company where he invests people's retirement, and he named the holding company for his business is Kingdom Stewards. And what's amazing is he's run his business so successfully, but so integriously, with a kingdom mindset. And when he started, it was so much smaller, but he ran with this set of principles, and today it's far beyond what he expected was possible. And yet the same principles are what's making his company successful. So,
yeah. Okay, I'm going to say, here's my final takeaway. It does always cost money, but don't consider the money first when deciding if it's worth it or not. I think that's why we put that do the math slide last. You do every single thing else first before you consider, the funding part.
I'd just like to share, I did a business plan for business management classes at Rocky, and one thing that they weren't aware of is, you can have a business plan, you can have all your resources available, but going in as a Native American to try to get a business loan to get started, start a business, you kind of fall between the cracks. Because there's, you get your comment in, and then you get your inventory. Then they look at your wages and, what you make and stuff.
Yeah.
So if you fall in that middle class, I said, you're still going to fall in that middle. You're going to fall in that crack.
yeah.
Because they don't see the investment. They don't want to take a risk when you're down here. So that's, what business is all about, is taking a risk.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of concepts that businesses don't understand, coming from background of,
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I would say, I'm sure you'd have more insight on that than we would. So I'm sure those are gaps. I would say for us, we haven't even gotten loans really. I think we've started with I think what we've experienced is, and what I've seen too, is like people that are business owners or leaders, basically you are paying yourself up front the cost that's a benefit that your community is going to get. So I feel like, honestly, getting funding is like hard. So I feel like for us, it was easier for Josh to be like, I'll just break my back roofing and then we'll just use that. So I don't know. I feel like for us, sometimes it's been easier to just fundraise or make money than it is to like jump through all those hoops. That's what it was with the Copper Ridge Park. It was like working through the funding available was going to be a literal nightmare. So it was easier to just try to do it personally.
But even as recently as 2 years ago, Jenna had the idea that she wanted to buy this commercial property, and it's just so cool, and there's just only so many available. She's like, well, we just have to do it. And
well,
like,
Josh
we legitimately don't have the money.
And I'm like,
we don't have the money.
Like, we're going to put together all the pieces. No, we were going to need $100,000. He's like, we don't have $100,000. I'm like, we're not going to focus on that. I'm like, maybe we will. Like, let's just keep moving forward. But
we did keep moving forward. We made the whole plans. We looked at the property, even though we knew we had nowhere near enough money to buy it. And wildly, a few months down the road, just
I'm not
some
saying
good
it
business
magically
opportunity-
appeared,
Not like it
but-
always happens that way, but some good business opportunities opened up. And we looked down and I was like, I think we have the money to buy this property. And I'm not sure, I didn't see it coming. So I just...
But if you push it as far as you possibly can and you're like, we just need this, you will be amazed at your ability to make that happen, because you already know, you're like, I already did all the work. We already have all this other stuff. It's just this piece. And you're more like, I don't know. You don't even know, like if you get to that spot and you're like, literally the only thing we need is this chunk of money. Then when you're out there talking to people, I don't know, you just tell them your story.
When we were young and married, we were really mismanaging our finances in Washington, D.C. And we found ourselves like in about $10,000 worth of debt. And so we did Dave Ramsey's book, and we went through and we made our budget. And then we were like, we need to pay off this $10,000 working the same jobs in a year's time.
We were
and so
not
instead
making
of
a lot.
going in debt, we need to go out of debt in 1 year's time. That's our goal. And it was wild that seeing it on paper and putting all the pieces together and saying, okay, that means that, maybe we don't need to buy this, or maybe we put all of our
we put everything on strips and we started being done with electricity at 8 p.m. We're like, we're done with electricity for the night.
Anyways, but because we could visibly see what it took, we changed the way that we lived our lives. And then every tiny little opportunity was like an opportunity to save money.
You get more
out of that.
motivated.
So,
Yeah.
So our God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills.
Yeah.
Our God multiplied 2 little breads and fishes and stuff, that's not to say that, go, I can do this when I get to the end. God's just going to dump it on me. But, just to know ahead of time, he's really in it, like you guys have said over and over again, and James spoke about, we just keep focusing and trusting.
Yeah, and I think I would try to minimize the weight that you give it. Just think about like maybe money is one piece out of 100. And so then you're thinking, probably, even if I don't have the money, like how can I get together these 85 other pieces? You know what I mean? It is a piece that matters. You need that piece, but it doesn't have to be your first piece. It can be your last piece.
Well, and her idea in Red Lodge, $2 million, that was like, there's just no way.
We don't have $2 million.
We don't have $2 million
When
to
it
just throw at
happens, you
something.
guys remember.
But when it happens,
10
you'll
years,
remember.
10 years, you guys remember this talk.
But
you're going to be like, they got the 2 million. You're like, where did that come from?
But what you can do is do it in a much smaller way. So you can take your business plan and scale it and be like, okay, well,
Yeah.
it didn't work on this level, but what could I do that would work, that could show that I can actually steward this process?
One
learn
Airbnb
the
in
process.
Billings.
So we did
Yeah.
one Airbnb, which has turned into a handful of Airbnbs, which one day will turn into this place, this tiny house village in Red Lodge. So
Yeah, it might take 10 years though. That's okay. Life is long.
I check. Oh, it is on. I hate to be done because it's been so good. Can we just give them a hand for, gosh, so much wisdom, so much humor. Thank you. It's good stuff. You both had so much to offer, and honestly, you would not have been able to tell that was your first time sharing together. You guys did so good at sharing together. So, yeah. So we are at, that's funny, the bottom part of the clock is cut out, so you can't, it's noon right now. That's all you can see. The food is here, so we're gonna eat. If you want to grab, if you paid for the lunch and you want to grab yours, and if you have something you have to do, I know some people have basketball games or whatever, you're welcome to do that. Hey, Israel. It's my son back there. And he was waving at me, so I thought I'd wave back at him. So if you want to stay, you're welcome to. We have tables set up in the kids ministry area, And so everybody can move down that direction, grab some food. We may need to put some of the food out still. I'm not sure if it's all down there. It's all set up. Ellie is in the back. She's been helping behind the scenes, getting the agenda up and the food ordered. So thank you, Ellie, for all of your work behind the scenes. Yeah. Let's pray for the food, and then we can head down there. Lord, thank you so much for this time, the wealth of information, knowledge, wisdom. God, we pray, Father, that you would stir in us a faith, a capacity to believe for the big things that you have for us this year and the big things that you have placed inside of us that you want to see come to fruition. We pray, God, you bless this food, bless our time together in Jesus' name. Amen.